Who the hell is Harris?
Even more unstable and more unhinged.
She's a stupid person.
Plain weird.
No one respects her. No one trusts her.
The proposition is what scares more people.
He wants to send the military after American citizens.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. Kamala to her inflation, to the nightmare on our border. Donald J. Trump, have you ever heard of him?
The worst attack on our democracy.
The worst vice president.
We are ready for a new generation of leadership.
Bring back the American dream. Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here.
Never again.
This race is locked up. Welcome. Chris Cuomo here. We have something very different tonight here at NewsNation. I've been calling it a town hall, but it's really like more of a telethon. And the cause is us, our country. We got it packed with players. You got Mark Cuban, Sarah Palin, Dana White, Geraldo, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Congressman Ro Khanna, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, leaders from key communities and key constituencies. Even the host position is stacked. Don't worry, it's not just me. I have co-hosts Bill O'Reilly and Stephen A. Smith. They're going to come out here in just a moment. And then we have the next 2 hours packed with all these different perspectives. I mean, that's the goal, is to have a rolling conversation. And we're capable to do that in part because of our advertising partner, Sling TV. So thank you to them for reducing the commercial load. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. First and foremost, though, for you at home, thank you for giving us an opportunity to do this with you. For you guys, applause for yourselves. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. All right. Now, who are these people? My cousins. No, they are a full complement of the political spectrum. We invited left, right, reasonable, Republicans, Democrats, independents. They're all here and well filled out, okay? I got a few players planted in here as well. Some pros who are part of the campaign, who know what's happening on the ground, people who have key constituencies and organizations that have very specific concerns. I got this wall over here. These are all swing state folks that agreed to come in and watch. Some of them have questions. Very nice. They told me not to speak to them directly, like it was a zoo or something like that. But so I'll just wave and say hello, hello, hello. All right, they're very friendly. Not so much. All right, Twitter. We are monitoring them as well. Why? Here's the goal. Give you some food for thought 6 days out from the election. I have two overarching concerns, as I see it, all right? Why are we where we are? And a little bit about how I define that. And then, how do we get somewhere better, as opposed to what you just heard from the campaigns, but you didn't need me to sample it. You're being beaten over the head with a very simple proposition. Who and what is worse, right? That's what it's all about. But it can't be. Because as we know in life, you never get anywhere better if you just focused on what's worse. So, where are we? Unless they're completely wrong, and to be fair, generally polls get directionally it right. They get the winner right. They just can be off on the margin. And now, two notable exceptions are the last two races where they had a bad feel because of whatever they're doing about how they're weighting their polls or how they're doing their samples in the swing states. And that's why I think the swing states are so tight. I don't think they measure them right. Clinton, by the way, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by about 3%, as predicted by the polls, but the Electoral College was way off, right? And that's why Trump is former President Trump, because he won in 2016 because they were so off. Again in 2020, polls were way off on Biden's margin in the swing states. They had him winning, just not that close. So, in terms of where we are, does it feel as tight to you as polls say it is? To you here, to our esteemed guests? We'll talk about it. The Cook report has it knotted up. I mean, it's within the margin of error. I know I'm hoping for something different. I'm hoping for a blowout, okay? Whoever wins, I hope it's a blowout. Why? Quick, clean, so we can get past the drama and to trying to do something to take the country to a better place. How and what that is, let's discuss. The swing states, show those numbers, knotted up. And again, this is where polling has been spotty. Look at it in terms of gender, really interesting. Trump has the men, Harris has the women. Why? We'll discuss. Look at the balanced priorities by gender. Pretty interesting to me. They're very similar with one flip. Put that up. Isn't that interesting? Now, there's a wild card in that for me. I think it is artificially limiting to refer to the issue of reproductive rights as just abortion, okay? That is a single procedure. Now it has become about a real right privilege argument. So I think it's a rights issue. I think it should be called that because that's how I hear it discussed all the time. Even when you adjust for sex, though, it's not a top 3 issue in terms of preferences. Why? We'll discuss. Might it be a surprise? We'll discuss. That's the state of the race, which has us divided. And I want to start on that perception, or is it the reality? So let me bring out the better minds, my co-hosts. Bill O'Reilly, you know him from the No Spin Zone, from BillO'Reilly.com. Witnessed political history for decades. A very keen eye, sir. Pleasure, pleasure. A very keen eye, especially when it comes to understanding. Yeah, much taller. Lifts in his shoes. This is my real height. He's 5'11". What's going on with Trump? Please have a seat, or you can stand, whatever you want. And can I bring out our other co-host? Do you have something you'd like to say?
You really want to?
Very much. He looks amazing. Stephen A. Smith of ESPN and Stephen A. Smith Show fame, a man who gets where people are and what needs to be considered when it comes to politics and culture. Thank you very much. Appreciate you doing this. It's great. How can I lose with these two guys here? So I wanted to ask you something. We can all sit down. So this Ipsos poll got me. I was talking to the audience about it before. One, we have our moment that defines the state of play. Dusty, put the video that Trump did today. This was clever, okay? Biden said what he said about the garbage is the followers or the garbage is what they're saying. Whatever he says, he said. Trump shows up at a campaign stop and gets picked up by a garbage truck. Bill O'Reilly tells me this. I said, was he in the front or the back? He didn't think it was funny. So that is the state of play. I see this Ipsos poll. 81% of the people, no matter what party, say we're more divided than united. But at the same time, 70% say we all want the same things. Bill O'Reilly, explain that disconnect.
Well, I think everybody wants a nice life and a pursuit of happiness and opportunities, so that's accurate. We are a divided country, second most divided era ever. The Civil War is first. We passed Vietnam. Vietnam was a very divided nation, but it was a one-issue division, a war. Now we have a cultural division. That's what the situation is. So you got two candidates, and I don't really believe it's about Harris versus Trump. I believe it's about progressive values, Harris, tradition, Trump. And that's what people are going to vote on, except for their wallet. The wallet is going to mean that Harris next Tuesday goes in with a deficit because it's so much more expensive 4 years later to live the essentials of life. And you can throw stats out all day long, but folks know what they're paying, and they don't like it. That's going to work against Harris.
And it is the top issue in every measurement that we've seen, both parties. Stephen A., how you see it?
The economy is always an issue. There is no getting around that. I think reproductive rights is going to play a huge factor. Consider the fact that women are 53% of the electorate, and she is deemed as being favorable towards women. I think that the overturning of Roe v. Wade on a federal level is something that could potentially come back to bite Donald Trump. Whether or not that's going to happen or not, we'll find out soon enough. But I also think it's important to bring this up, and there's no way around this. There is a white issue, and here's what I mean by that. White folks in America now make up 57.4% of the population, if I remember correctly. It's the lowest it has been practically ever. When you have a former president that was speaking about immigration, closing our borders, not letting people in illegally, and alluding, if not flat out saying that to some degree they're costing you. You have to remember that if you once considered yourself a very powerful entity, and you believe that that power is dissipating before your very eyes, and somebody comes along and they're literally to transfix your attention on that is the issue, and that is the reason why, it not only builds fear, it builds grievance. And we all know that when people go to the polls, the first thing that serves as a motivational factor is grievance. Whatever disgusts you most is one of the things that inspires you to go to the polls because you want to do something about it. That's what this comes down to. I'm not saying anything else. I'm not omitting anything else. I'm just saying that's a very factor. And when I say, just to be clear, when I say race, I'm not talking black and white. I'm talking about the white populace in the United States of America once being in a far more loftier position than they're perceived as being in now. And folks, inevitably, I don't care who you are, if you're in a powerful position and ultimately that dissipates before your very eyes, you're going to look for somebody to blame. And Trump is an absolute master at highlighting for you.
But he's not just talking to white people about that. He's talking to black people about that and Latino about that and saying, if you are struggling, there's somebody who wants your rung on the ladder. And they're coming in illegally.
I'm not trying to imply that he's only talking to one audience. I'm just talking about the most prolific audience in that regard.
The biggest audience.
Biggest.
Do you have a point on that?
Not really. I mean, I'm not a person who speculates about motive to vote. I'm a historian/journalist. So what I see is the majority of Americans don't like the open border. They think it's a dereliction of duty. They think that the Biden administration, for whatever reason, still undefined. You realize that the president, Joe Biden, has never explained to you or me why he opened that border. And do you realize that his vice president, and it's funny when Trump and his surrogates get out there and say, oh, Kamala Harris opened the border. Kamala Harris has no power at all as vice president. No vice president ever had any power. She's lucky she can order lunch, okay? Doesn't make policy, but she cheerleaded it. And you want to know what the biggest mistake Kamala Harris made in the whole campaign, which is going to lead to her defeat? On The View, they asked her a very simple question. Is there anything you would have done differently in 4 years? Can't think of anything. Hey, I got 50, all right? But I got 50 under Trump, too. I got 50 for each of them because it's so hard to run this government. You can't say for 4 years we never made any mistakes. She said that. And right away, my head snapped back. That along with the question about when did you know President Biden might be a little shaky upstairs? Oh, he's not shaky. He isn't? Does anybody believe that?
I'm not smiling because of that. I'm smiling because I know how Stephen feels about the proposition of you wanted her to dime out her boss on national television, and she wasn't going to do that.
You're not doing that.
Well, wait, there's a way to go around it.
I'm not, hold on.
There's a way to do it.
Well, first of all, just for the audience to know, see, a lot of us, no matter what we think we know or we've learned about politics, part of what we learned has come from this man who's been doing it for so many years. So a lot of times when you're pointing and you're talking about how you're a journalist and you lean on facts, the reality is most voters only deduce themselves to the facts that they are aware of, which might not be that much all the time. So ultimately, you have to deal with what they think they know. And when we talk about that, you also have to understand something like this. Yes, I'm bringing up, how are you supposed to dime out your boss? Well, let's bring it home where the goats can get it. The bottom line is this. None of us working in corporate America, none of us working on a job is going to dime out our boss. So when somebody brings that up and they say, you didn't call out Joe Biden, you didn't talk about him being cognitively, well, let me get this straight. Let's ask a rhetorical question. What if she had done that? You know what they would have said? You betrayed us. You betrayed the administration. You betrayed your employer. We can't trust you. What do we do? How does that correlate? How does that correlate in corporate America? Here's how. If you go and you talk smack about your boss, try getting another job in that industry when the reputation is that you talked about your boss. Everyone knows common sense. You don't do it. So why should she be held against? Why should it be held against her for not diming out Joe Biden?
Are you going to smack me?
No, I'm not.
I don't.
All right.
This lingo with Diamond, all she had to say was, listen, My relationship with Joe Biden on that level is personal.
Yes.
That's it. You don't say.
You would have been really satisfied with that answer.
I think that would have been a classy answer. And I'll prove it. People ask me all the time about Cuomo's mental deficiency.
I knew it was coming.
And I said, I can't discuss that.
But they already know about me. This was actually
Well, we already know about Biden.
Well, we do now.
We do now.
All right, now, interestingly, no matter where you look, the economy, specifically pocketbook politics, is always going to be at the top of the list and probably should be if you don't have an active war going on, right? Let's bring in a strong move by the Harris campaign, if you want to talk about the economy, is to bring in somebody who's universally respected as a member of the business community, right? And a celebrity and a billionaire. Mark Cuban checks every one of those boxes and is a very powerful surrogate for Harris and Walz as a result. Tech entrepreneur, and now making the case that Harris on the economy is the right choice. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on, Chris. Hey, Bill. Hey, Stephen A.
What's up, buddy?
So what do you say to the idea that the pocketbook will beat you because things cost too much now, and more specifically, more than when Trump was in charge?
Yeah, you can't deny that there's inflation. You can have discussions about why, and I can give you a ton of reasons, but you have to look at the bigger costs. The one thing that freaks out every household is the cost of health care. Donald Trump says he has a concept of a plan. What Kamala Harris has said is she's going to take on the pharmacy middlemen directly. She's going to introduce transparency directly. And what that means is, because I know I'm in this industry, that's going to cut the cost of your medications by 20 or 30%. And if she's able to get any help from Congress at all, the same will apply to all of healthcare, which means, you know, that 20% that we lost on your Gatorade and your bacon, you're more than going to make up. But under Trump, going forward, because he doesn't know what he's doing with healthcare, that the inflation rate will only continue at the same rate or go up, which means you're going to keep on going backwards if anybody in your family gets sick at all.
Just to remind, Bobby Kennedy Jr. is coming later on. It was just said that Trump may put him in charge of all the health services and agencies.
So you better get your shots now. All right?
So he'll come here. It's good to have, you know, that's the point of tonight, right? Different perspectives on the same thing. What do you have for Mr. Cuban?
Listen, people aren't macro economists, and neither is Trump, and neither is the vice president. What people know is if you have to buy car insurance or house insurance or health insurance, it's triple what it was 4 years ago. When you go to Piggly Wiggly to get whatever you want for breakfast, it's double what it was. So I'm not going to argue economic theory. I'm just going to live in the real zone. And the real zone is people are suffering. They're suffering.
Yeah, but Bill, you know what makes them suffer the most? It's not whether or not they get donuts at a higher price. It's not whether or not, even if they get eggs at a higher price. It's the fear of going to the doctor with a high deductible plan. It's the fear of going to the doctor with no insurance whatsoever and not having any idea, not only will you not, whether or not you're sick, but whether or not you can afford to care for your mom, your dad, your child. That is the ultimate fear that speaks at the dinner table. And Donald Trump has a concept of the plan. Kamala Harris not only wants to protect you, she wants to make everything that's involved in healthcare cheaper. And she's spoken about it specifically, not generally, specifically. And you can't argue the fact that that is the most expensive cost that you can have after your house.
Mark,
you could face $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 costs.
Mark, Stephen A. here. Let me ask you this question.
Yep.
So much has been made about what Trump and the Trump administration did with regards to the economy before COVID. What do you say when you're the Harris administration and people are questioning what is it that you did? You were a former attorney general, you're a former senator, you're the vice president of the United States, but you really don't have a record to stand on, yet he does. How does the Harris administration answer that?
Well, first, to Bill's point, she was the vice president. She has no power. And second, you have to look at the root of inflation. I'll tell you exactly when the very first kernel of inflation was set. And that was in April of 2020. It was right at the early days of the pandemic. The gas prices were $1.87. The oil companies went to Donald Trump and said, we are getting crushed with gas prices at $1.87. Please go to Saudi Arabia and your friend MBS. please go to Russia and your friend Vladimir Putin and ask them to reduce production. So he had a choice to make. Does he help his oil company cronies, or does he help keep gas prices low? You already know what he did. He went to his he went to support his oil company cronies, went to MBS and Putin and said, please reduce production. That was the day inflation started. And you can track minute by minute, hour by hour, month by month, year by year, quarter by quarter, that as long as that agreement was in place up until 2022, gas prices kept on going up. The minute that agreement came out and production changed, gas prices started going down and you saw inflation go down. So you can take all you want and blame it on the Biden administration, but it started with Donald Trump.
All right, let's get a different perspective on this. Mark, will you stay with me for a second? I appreciate you very much. And you know our next guest, big supporter of former President Trump, introduced the former president at the RNC, did a very good job, and spoke at his recent MSG rally as well. He is the CEO and president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, Dana White. Dana, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Haven't met you before, but I am a huge fan of the UFC, and I appreciate what you've added to the culture in that regard. Now, when you listen to Mark Cuban, you know economics as a businessman, but also in relating it to what you see in the people around you and what you're hearing. What do you believe his argument, how it lands with the voters, Dana?
Well, a lot of the things that I've heard, since I've been on here, this election is about competency. It's about competency. When we were talking about diamond out your boss earlier, this isn't about your boss. This is a world leader. This is the guy, this is the leader of the free world we're talking about here. Trump has already proven he can build a strong economy. He can secure the borders. And he is somebody that allies and adversaries respect. Those are all very important things. She has never, what has she proven? What has she done over the last 4 years? And you cannot make the excuse that she was the vice president and she wasn't in charge of anything. I think that's ridiculous. She is the sitting vice president of the United States right now. She's proven nothing. She's done nothing. I think she's in over her head. She knows she's in over her head, and nobody who is intelligent, like Mark Cuban, Stephen A., or any of these other guys can tell me they truly believe that she is the better candidate.
I'm going to have Mark get in. I'm going to have Mark get in, but Dana, just clarify. Dana, clarify something, and then I'll have Mark Cuban respond if he wants, which I'm sure he does. Dana, can you tell me of a vice president you've ever heard of who did something remarkable on their watch?
Not that they did anything. Let me tell you this. So
go ahead.
Think about this. Right, leading up to the debate, everybody was talking about that he's never been sharper. He's on top of his game. I was just in a meeting with the other day. They do the debate ends, and they figure out he's unfit to run, right? He's the sitting president of the United States. He's unfit to run. So now they slide her in, right? Nobody voted her there. Nobody voted Kamala Harris. If she went up against other Democrats, she would not be in the position she's in right now. Fact, okay?
Well, it's not a fact.
They slide her in there. Really? How did she do last time? How did she do last time?
She was Biden's running mate, and they got 85 million votes. But I hear you. The process was a problem. Let Mark Cuban get in. Talk to your friend Dana.
Dana, I love you. You're so wrong. Trump, inflation was up 25% over the Obama economy he inherited. Ask him about Yemen, where he decided not to take action and allowed 100,000 people to keep on dying in Yemen. Talk to him about his tariffs. What worked with his tariffs? He had 4 years to make tariffs work with China. China kicked his ass. China took him to court, right? Because he didn't know how tariffs worked, and it hurt the economy. The economy was rolling along, and it got so hit by the tariffs that his appointment to the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, had to come back in and cut interest rates 3 times. And then we get to the real point of reckoning, the pandemic. And what does he do? He says, if we don't test people, the viruses didn't really happen. He holds back on resources, except for Vladimir Putin, to keep people from getting healthy. That is not an accomplished president, Dana. He has not done anything. What he got, he inherited. You know what? His administration was the same as his personal wealth. He inherited it.
I got to jump in with course corrections here. Number one, the real wages, which is really the only economic barometer for the folks, was up 8.2% in the 4 years Trump was president. 8.2 across the board for working Americans. Fact. Under Biden-Harris, it is around 1%. No COVID pandemic. They have failed. Number two, inflation didn't start because Putin and the Arabs did anything. Inflation started, and I don't know whether you know this, Mr. Cuban, but Biden signed in his first week in office at least 20 executive orders, making it harder for every fuel company to harvest their product, whether it be fracking or oil or anything. The fuel company said, holy you know what, we're going to get hosed because our prices to get the stuff out of the ground are quadrupling, so we're going to do it retail now. That's what ignited it, not Putin and not Saudi Arabia. That is the truth.
Mark Cuban, respond, and then Stephen, please get in. Go ahead.
Bill, you're bloviating. Thank you very much.
No, I kept it pithy. I kept it. Cuomo understood it. I kept it pithy.
I did. There was no big words.
You're bloviating. The point is, yes, inflation. You think inflation just started when Joe Biden took office? That is.
It was 1.4 when Trump left. Inflation was 1.4. 1.4%.
I know. It just shows you don't know how inflation. You just don't. It shows you don't know what creates inflation. Yes, gas contributes to inflation. Why do you think Trump is so big on reducing energy costs? Because they contribute to inflation significantly. And beyond that, we produce more energy than we ever have. We produce more energy now than
in the latter part when they started to panic, not in the beginning.
Billy, look it up. Do you know how to use Google?
Uh-oh.
Oh, wait. No, that's where I get my information on Google, right? I actually research government records. Whoa, what a concept. Come on, 1.4% when he leaves office, and it goes to more than 9 in a year. Come on.
Let's bring Dana back into this. Stephen A.
Dana, it's good to see you, buddy. I know.
Yes,
I know. Dana.
Fully transparent.
I don't know any of these.
Dana White and I, and Mark Cuban and I, we're all buddies. I've known them both for years.
Must
Dana,
be fun.
Yes, it is a lot. Here's the deal, Dana. Dana, when you speak about Donald Trump, obviously there's a lot of people that look at him and they say, you know what, he did a lot for the economy. I remember that, you know what, he did exceed the deficit to about $35 trillion. What I would ask you, however, is this: outside of the economy, what else has he done that you would deem positive in your eyes?
Well, border crossings are up over 300% since he left office. And that's not including people that are undetected. And you cannot deny that the world was a much safer place when Trump was in office. It's undeniable. Do you realize that right now there are more armed conflicts right now than any time since World War II? It was a much safer place when Trump was here.
When we think about the only way I'll respond to that is this: you're talking about folks coming across the borders and obviously the dangers that it may cause in a lot of people's eyes. What about things that are happening domestically? What level of responsibility do you hand towards Trump in that regard?
Well, not only that, I mean, when you think about all the people that are crossing the border illegally, I mean, this is just common sense. What about all the people that are here that did it the right way and are trying to get in legally, that are being jumped over and being handed money and you know, a place to live, a telephone, credit cards, all the things that are going on? There are real Americans here that are going through hard times. That money should be going toward them. And there's nothing wrong with people coming to America. That's what this country was built on. But you have to come the right way. You have to come legally.
No, I got one more stat I want to throw out there. I said that real wages were up 8.2% under Trump. But there is an asterisk next to that. because for Stephen A., they're up 875,000%. And ESPN will go bankrupt if he leaves.
Don't hate him for his success.
That's right.
Don't hate him for his success or because he's pretty. All right, we're going to take a break. Dana White, I really appreciate you taking this opportunity. It's nice to meet you this way. I appreciate your advocacy for the former president. Thank you for doing it here on NewsNation. Mark Cuban, always a pleasure. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for making the arguments. It's helpful to the audience to hear you guys both. I wish you both well. All right, to be continued.
Good to see you, Dana.
See you, fellas. Gentlemen, be well.
Thanks. Hey, you too, buddy.
We're going to take a break. About 2.5 minutes. There are less breaks because our partner Sling is hooking us up. Still ahead, Sarah Palin, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Congressman Ro Khanna, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Geraldo Rivera, and even Lichtman. Is the professor ready to change his position? No way, and he'll tell you why. I told you it'd be fun. All right, thank you for coming back to us here at NewsNation. We are doing a big town hall, more of like a telethon, but I told you it was going to be interesting to hear Mark Cuban and Dana White talk about why they have conflicting ideas about the candidates as peppered in with Stephen A. Smith and Bill O'Reilly. That's something you haven't seen before, right? I am here with the big man, Bill O'Reilly, and Stephen A. Smith. Thank you for joining us. 6 days from the election, we wanted to give you food for thought, get a lot of different perspectives. Now we're going to have one that you all know changed the political landscape. Our next guest, 2008 GOP vice presidential nominee, former Alaska governor, Sarah Palin joins us. Good to see you. Have a seat, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Set the table for us first with your perspective on where we are now compared to the race that you ran in 2008.
I think, I kind of personalize it and watch Donald Trump get so beat up personally, but I think what's different about today than back in 2008 is he's got such vocal support, and that's due to social media now, which really empowers people to have their voice heard. I don't remember having a whole lot of defense, on my side back then, and it toughens you up though, and it makes you work even harder and want to debate even more aggressively. But I see that through social media there is a huge difference between being able to handle attacks personally and being able to counter a lot of misinformation.
And when you're looking at what's happening right now, you've been becoming more of a surrogate for what's happening within the Trump campaign. What do you believe the proposition is for the voters?
I think, we were promised, we'll go back to 2008 again, we were promised back in 2008 that America was going to be fundamentally transformed with an agenda that was going to be ushered in. Barack Obama had promised that. I think that has been happening, and I don't think Americans want that transformation. I think they want a restoration of all that's good about America and getting back to our Constitution and get back to our freedoms. So I think what is in front of voters is which agenda do you want? Trump does not believe in that transformation that had been promised, whereas it seems like Kamala Harris does. She's part of that agenda. She wants to perpetuate that.
Gentlemen.
I have a question for the governor. Thank you for being here, number one. Why do you think there's such a gender gap in the vote? Why are more women supporting Kamala Harris?
We were backstage watching a screen flashed a poll that shows that poll showed that a lot more women were for Kamala. But I was turning to my nephew who was sitting there with me, and I'm like, since when? And who says that? I believe that polls are really good for strippers and cross-country skiers, but not for a whole lot of other things. Because the women, you would.
There will be no demonstration.
You're the only person who can say that and get away with it, Bob. That was good.
But no, I personally don't think that gender is such a big darn deal in this race.
But the polls, all the polls say, every single one of them says, men are going overwhelmingly for Trump, and women are not quite as overwhelming, but very big for. Is it abortion? Is that what it is?
Well, I don't know, but I know the one time that gender does become an issue with me is when I hear men arguing pro or either for or against abortion. And I think, you know, when they talk about a woman's feelings and what they go through to make the decision, I say, you guys, you don't know. You haven't been there. And gender does become an issue with that topic. And perhaps that is the topic for a lot of single issue voters, but that's not the be all end all in this election.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I want to say this. I'm a guy, I'm against abortion, but I'm pro-choice because I don't believe any man should be having the right to tell a woman what to do with their body. Let me get that out the way. Having said that, my question to you would be this. In light of the rhetoric in years past, the things he's been accused of, combined with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and how that potentially does compromise a woman's right when it pertains to reproductive rights, do you support Trump in his position with women?
100%,
Why?
because he's not thwarting anybody's opportunity to end a pregnancy. He is supportive of the Supreme Court deciding Roe versus Wade, which should have been decided a long time ago and reversed, to allow the states to have their people vote on it. And then the wisdom of the people is made manifest via a vote.
But the state rights that exist now are a byproduct of the federal rights being stripped. And here's what I would say to you. When you take that into consideration and we think about, Michelle Obama gave a speech in Kalamazoo, Michigan this past Saturday. And I thought she highlighted and crystallized a woman's right when it comes to reproductive rights very, very clearly in a way that no woman has, as far as I'm concerned, in front of a microphone and a camera. And she didn't talk about abortion. She talked about all the other health issues that women have to experience that men have no clue of. She articulated how we don't share it with one another sometimes. We don't even share it with our doctors. We don't share it with our spouses or anything like that. It's not just about abortion. It's about those other rights as well. So having said that, you still feel that way?
Yes, I believe what Michelle Obama was hinting at, though, bigger picture, was she trying to paint a picture of women not having as many rights as men. And still, for the life of me, tell me one right that we do not have that men benefit from. America is a land of equal opportunity. And I think that she was talking more bigger picture, about, at least with the suggestion that women are somehow thwarted with our opportunities and not provided the same rights and protection as men.
I just want to make one quick point, and this goes to you.
Sure.
Democrats have been very effective saying to women, American women, that the government has no right to interfere with your body. That's the mantra, right?
Okay.
Isn't there another body involved here?
Amen. That's exactly, that's the point.
Especially in late term. Isn't there another body?
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so now we never, and I mean never, hear one word, adoption. We never hear what Bill Clinton said, abortion's safe and rare. What we hear from the Democratic candidate for president is abortion anytime, for any reason. Do you know there are only 3 non-communist countries in the world that has that law? And there is a reason for that.
So, you know what we need to do a better job of is allowing easier adoptions. We need to make it something that is more attractive, if you will, that alternative to taking the life of a baby in the womb. Instead of that, allowing and providing resources even for those who are in less than ideal circumstances, finding themselves in a situation where they're faced with that choice.
Right, and the key word is choice, right? Because once you create a right or remove one, it then becomes about who gets to make the decisions. And then you have this whole decision chain that you're discussing about adoption and health or whatever it is, but who gets to make the determination? That's the issue that the Democrats are trying to isolate. How well they do it, to Stephen A. Smith's point, is a different question. I will bring in a much better arbiter of the Democrats' case than I, Congressman Ro Khanna from California, of course, of the Oversight Committee, Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Your colleague, Jared Moskowitz, is in the crowd. He's going to be up also. When you hear the argument about what this issue should mean and how it should be argued from Governor Palin and others, what do you believe the Democratic response is?
Well, the response is simple. We had Roe versus Wade for many, many years. It was a right of women to make that choice with their bodies, and it's overwhelmingly popular. It explains Bill O'Reilly's point of why there is a gender gap. But there's another reason there's a gender gap, and that is what some people find funny about Donald Trump and what find him engaging in locker room talk. It's offensive to a lot of women. I mean, that's just the reality. And you can say, well, that's just how guys talk in a locker room, but it's rubbed a lot of women the wrong way. And I think that also explains the gender gap.
Governor, you got a question for the congressman?
I think we're still missing a big and significant point here that I think Bill was suggesting, and that is we also have to talk about the rights of that child, of that baby. That child in the womb has that right to life also. So when we talk about choice and we speak about it so flippantly, I think we're forgetting that we're talking about the sanctity of human life. And again, Bill, I think that's where you were going, and that's when you brought up the other countries that allow taking the life of a defenseless, innocent human being.
I just want everybody to know there are two sides to this story.
Yeah.
Because the media won't report the other side, all right, the pro-life side. They deride people who don't believe in abortion, generally speaking. Corporate media does it all the time. And now this has been made into an anthem that Trump wants to, and she said it last night. Did you hear this at Kamala Harris in her speech in the White House? 50,000 people staring at her going, Trump wants to ban abortion. That's not true. And not one media outlet picked it up. Not one. But Trump lies all day long, 24/7, right? Am I wrong?
Is that a statement?
Exactly. That's
I'm
what I'm
asking
asking.
you a question. Now, if I ask Cuomo, am I wrong? I know the answer, which is why I directed it to you guys.
No, not at all.
Well,
go ahead, Steve.
Well, let me direct the question to you. Is he the paragon of virtue and veracity and honesty? I'm asking a question.
If that's what your litmus test is, to vote for the leader of the United States, a perfect person, then you read my book, Confronting the Presidents. We'd have to weed out about 30 out of the 45.
Yeah, at least.
Okay?
Nobody's looking for perfection. Nobody's looking for perfection. Not in this. What they're looking is for something they can tolerate. And the culture wars have become more and more consuming in our politics. And frankly, as someone who grew up in it, there's a very simple reason for that. It's easier. It is way easier. I'm old enough now to remember when this issue came up. You're not. But I remember, Gov, you know, when this entered the political space, it was because we were in a very hard economic time. And it was much easier to talk about something that absolutely matters to people. And Catholics were one of the first catalysts for this issue in terms of resistance to the idea of forsaking the child. So this resonates. You hear what Ro Khanna says about how women feel. We have his colleague, Jared Moskowitz here, congressman from Florida, of course. And when you hear this, that you guys are forgetting half of the equation when it comes to rights with reproduction, which is, of course, the life in the womb. How do you negotiate that?
Well, first of all, I think most Americans, if you look at the issue, are not for 6 weeks, and they're not for late-term abortions. I don't support late-term abortions. But if you look at President Trump's position, which it's unclear, he said he supported the amendment in Florida, the constitutional amendment, and then he said he was against it. He's come out and said that he supports 15 weeks, but he supports that with exceptions, right? That's not some moral compass. He's looking at the polls. He's looking at the polling on the issue.
Well, wait. That's an interesting point you're making, Congressman. What was your reaction when the nominee for the Democratic Party said Trump wants to ban abortion? You know that's not true.
Well, hold on a second.
Wait, you know it's not true?
I know when Trump says something,
I
know it's not true.
No whataboutism here. No whataboutism.
Hold on.
You knew and know that what she said was false.
The only
does that bother you?
Hold on. The only reason you can say that is because we have a filibuster in the Senate. If it
She made the statement in front of the world.
Hold on. Yeah.
It's not true.
But Bill,
do you support that?
But Bill, when you say it's not true in this world, it's not true today. It might be true tomorrow.
That's pretty convoluted.
No, hold on. When Roe v.
It might be true tomorrow?
Yeah, because when Roe v. Wade fell, the Republican Party talked about passing a 15-week.
It's Donald Trump we're talking about.
Hold on. When the Roe v. Wade fell, Republican Party talked about passing a 15-week abortion ban. That's what they tried to do. And by the way, the speaker just yesterday talked about getting rid of Obamacare.
Look,
so that was something that was that was something that was settled, and now we're back to getting rid of Obamacare.
When Trump says that every legal mind supported Roe v. Wade going back to the states.
Yeah, every legal mind.
Right. I said that's not true. You won't say that what Harris said last night is not true.
You don't know it's not true.
Oh, I don't know it's not true?
You don't know that that's
I've got 5 quotes from Trump saying directly, I'm not going to ban abortion. If there was ever a bill, I would veto it.
So
that's what he said.
So hold on. So what you're saying is you can now take what Trump says to the bank. You can take what Trump says to the bank. I just want to be clear.
All right. So let's get some perspective from people who are working.
No, hold on. Bill, I didn't say he's the devil. I don't think everything Trump does is bad. But you want me to take someone's word who has lied 30,000 times since he's been president.
All right, let's get perspective from people who are working the issue on the ground, okay? Jenna Arnold is in Pennsylvania for the Harris campaign. When you're canvassing and you're talking about this issue, what resonates and what is the pushback that you're seeing on the ground in a state that could decide everything?
Well, not only is it a state that could decide anything, but I am here taking away time from what I need to be doing in Montgomery County and Bucks County. So I would prefer to be on the ground with my fellow organizers. And I really appreciate you asking a question to Sarah about abortion versus a congressman or 2 other male journalists, because this is a female issue. And what we are seeing is that men first. Nobody really understands how infuriated women are right now. There is not a single poll, and I love your throw to what polls should and shouldn't be, but as far as I'm concerned, there's not a single person who knows what's going to happen in this election, and if they say they do, it is how you should interpret everything else that they say. I am sitting in a position of, I am so baffled how you believe what you believe, and you are sitting there looking at me saying, I am so baffled by how you believe what you believe.
You are baffled?
Yes.
Okay.
Deeply.
What are you baffled by?
Because as the congressman just said, he just said he wouldn't ban abortion. Sarah's suggesting it should go back to the states.
No, but I don't know what you're baffled by.
I don't understand, and as most other supporters of Trump would say, they don't understand why I'm not a fan of his.
No, I understand.
And hold on, let me finish.
I got it.
And Harris supporters don't understand how Trump supporters believe what they do. And I want to challenge what you said at the top of this segment. You said, we are making a decision about what we want in this country. It's not what, it's how.
How so?
Because we have already collectively lost this election.
Who's we? Who's we?
All of us. All of us.
Why?
Because we're sitting here debating what's going to happen with different demographics. My hunch tells me Sarah has had a personal experience, not her individually, but she has held the friends of people who have had to make very difficult decisions, not just about abortion, but how they're paying for their health care bills, how they're paying for diapers, how they're paying for gas. And here we are fighting over what inflation rates might actually be. You use the word, Bill, about tradition. You say it's the progressive left that wants to move forward, and we're talking about tradition. This isn't like a Christmas activity or a Christmas song or what do you have on the Thanksgiving table. We are challenging outdated policies from the past that clearly are not working. Clearly.
May I ask you a question?
In 1 second. I'm interested in how we are going to move forward, because I am a frightened American who knocks on doors every day, all day, in the most significant counties in this country, in Philadelphia. And everyone goes like, I don't know. I'm scared. I don't know what to do next. And I say, okay, do you have any thoughts about the candidate? Do you want to hear my opinion? Where's your head? And they often, the undecideds, because there are undecideds out there. Again, any poll that says there's not undecideds, they don't know what, that's not been my experience on 6/11. Right. And they say, I'm watching the news, and what the pundits are saying is not adding up with my gut. And I don't know how to thread that.
Stephen has a question, and then I want to bring Tiffany in.
I am dying to ask you this question because, as you so accurately pointed out, you are a woman. We are not. So based on what? Oh, I'm positive. I'm positive.
I can vouch for Steve.
I'm very positive. Okay. Having said that, I must ask you this question: based on what both candidates are saying, what you believe they will do, and what they stand for, who should women stand for?
My first instinct and response is each other. And
hold on, I agree, but
I know I'm going to get there.
You got two candidates.
Come on,
you got two choices.
You know I was coming back,
okay.
And this is the other thing. We don't have two choices. We have a boss that we can put in office that provides air cover for us to do the work for 4 years. I am done with an America that shows up for these conversations 6 days out. So, what do I? It is not.
I don't understand why you're clapping, but go ahead.
It is not. Let me just finish, and I want to answer his question.
Go ahead, Jenna.
It is indisputable which candidate has the capacity to go like this to everybody. The person who isn't going to change their mind constantly, the person who didn't put Supreme Courts in justice that took my rights away. I don't even need to say that person's name. You know exactly who it is.
So, Jenna, let's get a balanced take on it. Tiffany Justice, co-founder of the Moms for Liberty. How do you believe the issue of not just reproductive rights, but where women are going to be in terms of what they will prioritize in this election?
Yeah, I think Jenna's right. I think American women are infuriated, and we're infuriated about the fact that only 1/3 of children are reading on grade level in America's public schools. Where was my body, my choice during COVID? Yes. Right? So, you know, it's almost 9 o'clock. We spent a lot of time talking about something that is now an issue for the states to handle. And I think it's time we start talking about where we really are in America when it comes to kids. And as far as Jenna's point about which candidate is going to put their arms around everyone, you know what I see? I was at MSG. I gave the invocation on Sunday, and I saw RFK there. I saw Tulsi Gabbard there. I saw people in that audience that have never voted Republican before in their lives, and they're coming together to support Donald Trump. So we're looking towards the future. We're very concerned about the health issues that we're seeing across the country, and making America great again, making America healthy again is something that American moms want.
Do you believe that Trump, and then we're going to go to break right after this, but do you believe that Trump will be different this time than he was last time? Because he was not a conciliator. He was not about a big tent.
I don't think that the media ever gave President Trump a chance. I think they came after him right away.
Yeah, but
they tried to impeach him right away. The government worked.
We both know the former president. It is not the media that determines what a president does with their time.
The media has been completely unfair to President Trump in his first term. They were unfair to him in his first term. They have continued to be unfair, fake news again. And the truth of the matter is that we're cutting through all of that now. We're reaching more Americans than we ever had. To your point, Sarah, social media has been an amazing opportunity for us to be able to talk to people and have conversations. And what I think you're going to see is that American women are going to vote for a brighter future, and that's going to be President Trump.
Go ahead. Tiffany, thank you. Stephen?
I don't have any resistance to what she's saying. I understand where she's coming from. I just love how everybody wants to point the finger at the media, but you don't remember to give the media credit for getting him elected in the first place because of all the publicity that they gave him, so he didn't even have to go out there and spend money campaigning because he was getting free publicity by being over the airwaves.
Isn't that called covering the presidential race?
No. I'm talking. You could say that, but ask Kasich and others and the inordinate amount of airtime he was given compared to other candidates. Nobody was complaining about that at that particular
That's why Hillary Clinton lost.
You do have those facts. I know you know that.
All right. Yes. Appreciate the conversation. Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining us remote. Appreciate you very much for you weighing in on this. Always welcome here at News Nation. We're going to take a break. 2 minutes, 37 seconds, in case you're timing it out. When we come back, Geraldo Rivera, Bobby Kennedy Jr. More questions from the audience, more questions from you. Here in the commercial, you know what's really nice? In the commercial break, you see everybody stand up, right? And they're all talking to each other. They're all walking around. They don't know each other as far as I know, but they're getting up, they're walking around, they're looking at Moskowitz and saying what amazing shoes he has on. They didn't know members of Congress could be so hype. And we are continuing the conversation. We got Bill O'Reilly, Stephen A. Smith. We now have a new cast of people who want to contribute to the conversation. We have NewsNation correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, and of course, former independent presidential candidate, member of the Trump presidential transition team, Bobby Kennedy Jr. It's good to see you. So let me start with a little news with you. I am reading about what the extent of potential control the former president, and if he wins, what he would want you to do. How do you want to explain it to the audience?
President Trump has asked me to reorganize the federal health agencies, the agencies that have a portfolio that affects human health, which is CDC, NIH, FDA, as well as some of the agencies within the United States Department of Agriculture. He's asked me to clean up the corruption, number one. Number two, end the conflicts of interest, return those agencies to their rich tradition of gold standard, empirically based, evidence-based science, evidence-based medicine, and to end the chronic disease epidemic in this country. And he's asked me specifically to measurably reduce chronic disease in our children within 2 years.
So let's deal with concerns about you and then concerns about him. The concern about you. There are people who will say you are an extremist and that they are concerned about what you would do with that kind of power in government. What do you say to people, whether it's about the vaccines or what they believe about you personally, that they have concerns about you, what you would do with that power?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I've written 5 best-selling books on public health, so I know, and I've litigated on public health for 40 years. And won some of the biggest lawsuits in our nation's history on public health issues. My job is to really, what I have an expertise in is addressing corruption. I've sued almost all of these agencies. I've sued FDA, CDC, NIH, FCC, the USDA, almost all these agencies. When you litigate against these agencies, you get a PhD in corporate capture and how to unravel it. So my portfolio and my charge is going to be to end the corruption of those agencies and let them do real science again, and then not to impose my personal choices or beliefs on the American people, but give them information that they can make their beliefs. We're a free country. People ought to have a choice about their own health, and they ought to have the best knowledge. And we ought to be the healthiest country in the world.
Now, one question about Trump, then I open it up to my esteemed colleagues here. What can you tell people who don't believe that Trump would be committed to something like that? That once he gets in there, who knows what he's going to do, but he's never been about everybody's health before. Why would he be about it now?
Well, you know, a lot of people, when I aligned our party with President Trump, said, oh, you can't trust him and you better get a written contract from him. And of course, you can't do that. And
because he'd break it and then sue you?
Well, no, you can't. You can't put him under a president of the United States under a contract to do certain things. It would be wrong optically, and it would be wrong legally. You can't do it. But what President Trump did after I made that agreement with him is he's kept his word about everything so far. He did things that I didn't ask him to do. He put me on the transition team. Most transition teams don't start to the day of the election because they're paid for by the GAO. And what President Trump said to me is, he said, last time in 2016, I came into office and I had no idea how to govern. And I was immediately surrounded the day after the election with all these big corporate people and corporate lobbyists, and they said, appoint this guy, appoint that guy. And he said, I did it. And they were a bunch of bad people. That was, you know how he says bad people?
Yes.
Well, that's what he said. People like John Bolton and the head of NSA and all of these other people, corporate lobbyists who came in and ran our agencies, which I was a huge critic of. And he said, I'm not doing that this time. I care about my legacy. I want to leave a country that's healthier. This is an existential threat to the American people. When I was a kid, my uncle was president. 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today, it's 60%. When my uncle was president, I was a 10-year-old boy. We spend zero on chronic disease in this country. Today, we spend $4.3 trillion. It's existential. 77% of American boys cannot qualify for the military because of a chronic disease diagnosis. When I was a kid, the average pediatrician saw one case of diabetes in his lifetime. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. When I was a boy, and today in my generation, 70-year-old men, 1 in 10,000 of us has autism. Our children, my children, 1 in 34. In California, 1 in 22. This is an existential threat to our country. And he said, I want to end it, and I want to leave as my legacy to the American people the end of the chronic disease epidemic and make us, again, like when I was a boy, the healthiest nation in the world.
I have a question. Go ahead. I'm confused about the détente with you and Trump. I'm confused. Befuddled.
My wife is very confused about it, too.
When people say Trump doesn't care about health, as we just heard the question posed, I say, well, he got Operation Warp Speed up faster than any human being could have gotten it up, and everybody got vaxxed. You don't like the vax. So how does that work? Trump got the vax, government mandated the vax, you don't like the vax. How did you bridge that gulf?
Well, one of the things that President Trump said to me when I began my meetings, I said, there's a lot of things that I don't agree with you on. And he said, I don't care about that. He said, we agree on the key things. And the 3 things that we agreed on was 1, ending the addiction to foreign wars. Number 2, ending the surveillance and censorship and protecting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And number 3, ending the chronic disease epidemic. And he said, you can go ahead and criticize me, and I'm going to criticize you. He criticized me the other day, publicly, again and again.
And that's why he's ahead in the polls.
Right. And I think that's a great thing. He wants a big tent. Tulsi doesn't agree with him on a lot of things. Elon doesn't agree with him.
Wait a second. The second thing you mentioned was the Constitution. You and the president discussed how you will honor the Constitution. How can you trust President Trump to honor the Constitution when he was a sore loser last time and defied the Constitution, defied the constitutional succession, and attempted to basically stay in power despite the fact that he had lost the election? So how can you, is this the person you're making common cause to seek the constitutional nirvana? I have deep doubts about that.
Like I said, I disagree with President Trump on many things that he did during the last administration. He today has a heightened sensitivity towards censorship, towards the weaponization of the federal agencies against our democracy, to the emerging power of these totalitarian systems and totalitarian technologies, AI, facial recognition technology, low-level satellites that can look at every square inch of our country every day, all these other technologies that give totalitarian systems capacities they've never had before to monitor and control every aspect of our lives. He's sensitized to those, and I think, what happened at the end of that election, there was a peaceful transition of power. Peaceful transitions of power are a critical part of our democracy, and I disagree with a lot of things that happened there.
You don't think
I think the attacks on our Constitution over the last 4 years have eclipsed anything that happened on January 4th. I think the censorship is the largest threat to American democracy today.
Fair enough. I do have this question. You have been a bit outspoken, to say the least, about the tactics you believe the Democratic Party has engaged in to sort of derail you and turn themselves against you or what have you. Had that not been the case, which side would you be on?
Well, the experience that I had in my own campaign, first of all, I try not to ever make any decision based upon my own personal prejudice or personal feelings. I try to do what's good for this country. And, but my personal experience of watching the Democratic Party turn against democracy Stephen, when I was a kid, the Democratic Party of my father, of Robert Kennedy, of John Kennedy, was the party that was fighting to make sure every American could vote for who they wanted. And I encountered a Democratic Party that canceled the primaries, literally, to make sure that Americans couldn't vote. I see somebody here, and then anointed a candidate, had a ballot coup against a candidate who had severe cognitive impairments, and anointed a candidate without a single vote, and sued me to keep me off the ballot in 10 different states after 1 million Americans had signed petitions saying, we want to have a choice to have him on the ballot. It spent $10 million and forced me to spend $10 million fighting to stay on the ballot. And then as soon as I aligned myself with Donald Trump, they sued me to keep me on the ballot. And yesterday, I lost a lawsuit in the Supreme Court of the United States that forced my name to remain on the ballot in Michigan and Wisconsin. This was brought by the DNC. I'm not running for president. Why does the DNC want a person on the ballot who is not running for president? They want to do that because they want to interfere with the election and interfere with the choice of Americans. And I don't think that's the case.
I agree with that.
I appreciate the explanation. I'm not refuting it, but respectfully, it still didn't answer my question. Had that not happened, which side would you have been on? Of course, if one side irritates you by doing all of those things, it's easy to go to the other side. But if none of that had happened, where would you be sitting right now?
Let me answer that. If the Democratic Party had let me participate in primaries, right, I would have stayed in the Democratic Party.
Okay.
That's an honest answer. I want to get a question from the audience. You good with that? It's good to see him. It's good to see him. Where's Dion? Oh, you got him. All right, go ahead. Ask a question.
Stand up.
Yeah, please stand up so that the audience at home can get a good look at you. Been booing me for the last hour and 7 minutes.
Go on, go on. Actually, I used to be the National African American Affairs for American Values 2024. Thanks to brother Mr. Rose back there.
Thank you.
My question for you, exactly, Stephen A. Smith. In May, you made a comment about African American. Thank you.
Better?
Yeah, thank you, brother. In May, you made a comment that African American affairs African Americans can identify with President Trump because of his legal woes. But then, for some strange reason, you backpedaled and retracted that statement and made a public apology. Why so?
First of all, respectfully.
Because I don't trust you.
First of all, respectfully, know who you're talking to and know what you're talking about when you ask that question. Because that is not what happened. That is not what happened. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I was on right here with Chris Cuomo. 30 minutes later, I was on with Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity asked the question. I know you don't. I know a lot of African Americans don't necessarily support Donald Trump, but the number is growing. Why do you think they are supporting Donald Trump more so than anything else, more so than ever before? What I answered was, this man, when he made the statement that the system is rigged, that what I'm going through, the courts, the prosecutors, elected officials, these folks know what that is about. I said that part is correct from the standpoint that African Americans in this country have religiously lamented the state of affairs that exists with our government, with our elected officials, with some folks in law enforcement, not all law enforcement officials or anything like that. I was explaining that when he made that point, that part was accurate. I turn around, everybody ignores the fact that I said it to Chris Cuomo. They ignored everything else that I said to Sean Hannity to articulate that position, and they went and they ran with it to make noise and clickbait and headlines, misinterpreting what I said. That's what happened. That is what happened.
So what's with the apology in the backpedaling?
No, I didn't backpedal.
Like America.
Well, first of all, I don't.
Paul Harris, DNC.
My brother. All right, don't interrupt me again. Here's the deal. When I speak, just so everybody knows, I don't backpedal. I say what I say. I mean what I say. And here's what happened. I went on my show, and what I did was explain to America, let me make sure I'm clear about what I was saying.
I get it.
That's all.
Not
backpedaling.
I got a question from the swing wall.
Yes.
Angela from Wisconsin has a question. What is your question?
Call out and get everybody.
Awkward.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am a military wife. My husband is active duty military, and I also have 6 children. My question is about immigration and the economy, and the fact that during the height of COVID, we had more money than we have now with 6 minor children versus 2 now. How are we going to solve the immigration problem without putting the cost of it on us taxpayers? Because we can't afford it.
I'm going to have Geraldo field the question, but I want to thank you for your service as well, because as we know, no matter who is actually in the military, the entire family serves. So thank you for your service. Geraldo,
Absolutely.
What do you do with it?
Thank you from the bottom of our heart. We love you. The one way we do not solve the immigration problem is to refer to these poor people as vermin and animals poisoning the blood of our nation. That we don't talk of Mexican immigrants as if they were predisposed genetically to commit murder. We don't promise mass deportations on day one. There is a way to solve these problems going back beyond Ronald Reagan, back to the Eisenhower days, where there is a natural ebb and flow of a seasonal population, where there is a relationship between the United States and Mexico and the Central American countries, where everyone polices their own borders. Do you think that Mexico doesn't know that hundreds of thousands of undocumented people are going through 1,500 miles of Mexico to get here? They know exactly. It's become part of their racket. The cartels have taken it over. It is money making for them. Where is I think this is the issue that the Biden administration is most vulnerable and affecting Vice President Kamala Harris because they did such a terrible job. They have botched it. The frustration of that military wife and mother makes that very clear. But you've got to do it in an international way. You've got to have cooperation. We are the richest nation on earth. We are next to one of the poorest nations on earth. Of course, if you're in the poorest nation on earth, you're going to want to bring your children here. You're going to want to seek the American dream that our forefathers did. But you solve this problem with cooperation, with logic, with reason, and with compassion.
I want to get a take from you, Bill, and I want to get a take from Bobby, and then I'm going to go to break.
So, all right, this is how you solve the problem. The first thing you do, and Trump did this in his last year in office, was have a quiet conversation with the president of Mexico, saying, unless you put your military on the southern border with Guatemala and the northern border with us, we are going to designate all the cartels as terrorists. And when we do that, we're going to kill them with Navy SEALs, with drones. Obrador folded in less than 24 hours, and he put the military on both borders, which cut down.
It wasn't the military.
Yes, it was.
He threatened him with trade, which was fine, which was legit. You're not going to declare war on Mexico, for goodness sake.
You had your say. Now I'm going to tell you what happened. I don't care whether you believe it or not. So Trump said to Obrador...
He's been talking that way to me for 21 years.
And it still hasn't gotten through. So Obrador put the military, which cut the migrant intrusion on the border about 75%. Okay, that's what you do, number one. Number two, and I agree with humane, we are a humane country. Donald Trump cannot deport, mass deport. It's against the Constitution. Every person on American soil is entitled to our constitutional protection unless we interdict them coming across. And that's what Obama did. When the Border Patrol got them coming across, they turned them right back. All right? Barack Obama deported more illegal migrants than any other president. Right now, we have 14, at least, million foreign nationals in this country unsupervised. Within 3 months, they would be required by federal law, every one of them, to register at a post office and answer a questionnaire, which would then be sent to the Department of Homeland Security. So there would be a database of who is here and what those people are doing. Then the government would decide which cases would be heard first, and the others would receive designations. Some would get green cards. So if you had been here 6 years, you owned a home, you had 2 children who were American citizens, the government would say, okay, you can work, support your family, you're still going to have to go through the process. That is how you do it.
Well, how do you respond to the fact that your friend, President Trump, is not pursuing that, nor is he promoting that in any way, shape, or form?
Because he's using the issue to get votes.
Well, that I agree.
Hold on, Jenna. Let me get Bobby, and then we'll go to break, and we'll continue the conversation. Hold on, Jenna. Let me get Bobby in here. Bobby, you want to deal with things that are making us sick, that are making our kids sick, that have a lethality, what you call an existential crisis. Fentanyl wasn't on the list. It's the most neglected issue to me in terms of getting votes, to Bill's perspective. What do you think about fentanyl and the move of targeting the cartels as terrorist organizations, allowing for the legal complications in doing that? Do you believe that that is a major health issue for America that has to be addressed?
Fentanyl is a crisis in this country. We had 106,000 overdose deaths in the last year, which is almost double the number of kids that we lost during the 20-year Vietnam War, but in a single year, and every year it's going up and up. In the last couple of years, it's gone down by a few thousand. But it's still a terrible crisis. On the border, I've been to the border many times. The first time I went to the border at Yuma, I arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it looked like the beginning of the Boston Marathon. There were, I watched 300 people come across. They were arriving in the other side in big, shiny white buses that are owned by the Sinaloa drug cartel. And they came only 2 that night came from Latin America. Most of them were coming, the first 110 came from West Africa. The rest of them were from all over Europe. The cartels are advertising on TikTok and YouTube all over the world, telling them exactly what they can do. And you can fix this easily. And I've talked to dozens of Border Patrol, including the head of the Border Patrol, who's part of my campaign, the former head of it, Commander Chris Clem, and law enforcement on both sides of the border. It's easy to fix. President Trump fixed it during his term. We need to complete the wall. There's 27 gaps. They're small gaps, and they can complete it. You don't need a wall 2,200 miles from Brownsville, Texas, to San Diego, but you need a wall in those areas that are urban, where people can easily disappear. We need to reinstate the Migratory Protection Act, which says that people who arrive in Mexico and are seeking asylum in the United States need to have their case adjudicated in Mexico before they come across the border. And we need to change the catch and release program back to what it was under President Trump, which is to catch and return. And then we need to reinstate along those areas that are not urban all of the equipment that was taken down by the Biden administration. You know, when you go down there, you see these 27 gaps in the wall, And right next to them are these giant piles of construction material that were purchased by the American people to complete the law. When President Biden came in, he ordered that all stopped. And that's where they're coming in. And it is a humanitarian crisis, and you have to have great compassion for the people. The people who've come across, it is worse than the humanitarian crisis. These people are being robbed, they're being raped. I spoke to them personally. They're being extorted, they're being controlled, their children are being removed. There's 325,000 kids who have disappeared, many of them clearly being sex trafficked. We have to end this. We need immigrants in this country. We need it to keep our Social Security system solvent. There are 10 million open jobs in this country, most of them for small businesses, and need immigrants. So we need wide gates to change our immigration policy to make it easier for people to come across legally, have a faster path to citizenship. We need secure borders. There's no nation that can survive without secure borders. The Israelis have a fence that until Hamas came across with this huge, construction machinery and weapons and everything else, it kept people out. And we can do that here in this country. We can fix this. It's important what these gentlemen talked about bringing Mexico and Guatemala and the Latin American countries. We caused a lot of these problems through military interventions over the years. We cause the problems that make people want to immigrate, but that's not what's happening now. We're seeing this coming from all over the world, and it is a bad system, and it needs to be ended, and we can end it overnight.
Bobby, thank you for taking the opportunity to talk about it. I appreciate it. We're going to take a break. It's going to be more of your questions and comments when we come back. Plus, the man who has never gotten it wrong yet, Professor Alan Lichtman, is going to come on. He's going to be joined by a good friend of mine. Last name is Luntz. May want to Google him. And they will tell us where they believe this race is. Frank is honest. He says, I don't know. The polls can't tell you. Lichtman says he knows. Does he still know? Next. Final say town hall, but really it's more of a listening tour to a whole kind of sea of perspective about what should be mattering in this election. And I got to tell you, one thing you got to be honest about. If the campaign had been conducted with this conversation that we're having tonight, wouldn't it be a different choice structure for you? Wouldn't it be? Bill O'Reilly, Stephen A. Smith, Geraldo Rivera, Governor Sarah Palin joining us again. And now we're going to look at it from a little bit more of an expert perspective on what the state of play is from those who look at the numbers and look at the regions, all right? We have communications consultant and pollster Frank Luntz, good friend of mine and as good a mind as we have in the business. Now, Frank, I fell in love with you again on the show when you said what nobody ever wants to say in our business, which is, this one's a tough read. This is a tough read. Why is that the truth?
Well, it's interesting that I'm on with Bill O'Reilly. I don't know if you remember that you and I talked about this in 2022, and I was very skeptical of how well Republicans were going to do. And he was very convinced that Republicans were going to have this big landslide.
I was wrong. Yep.
And that's the first time.
Whoa. Well, that's
Hold on.
Hold on.
Okay.
But I've been right about everything.
This show's over. Have a good night. Can't get any better than that.
I can now leave. And everyone's taking it seriously. And I'm watching this, and I love this, because this is America in front of you. And there's America up on that wall. But I'm not doing it for applause. And I actually would seek not to have it. This is really serious. People are going to be really angry 6 days from now, really angry. And I'm afraid what's going to happen 8 or 9 days from now when people believe that they were robbed on both sides, because I can't tell. And we know what states matter. We know what voters matter. I'll give you an example. Latinos, who traditionally vote Democrat by about 22, 23, 24%. Right now, the margin for them, and we'll see what happens because of the comment about Puerto Rico, but we'll see what happens, because I think Trump's going to do pretty well among them. Younger women are going to vote in droves for Kamala Harris, and it's going to be significant. And for the Republicans, they have to drive this vote of the unions. They have to drive Latinos, and they have to drive, frankly, African-American men, young African-American men who have given Trump a look. For women, it's the younger vote. But in the end, are we going to come together? I'm not convinced of it. And it scares me as a professor, as someone who teaches. How do we get over this? He went to West Point yesterday. He was a star. Stephen A. Smith was a genuine star. They look up to him. They appreciate him. There wasn't a mention, not one, of Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Not one. It was all about leadership. It was all about character. It was all about sacrifice. And dude, thank you very much for what you said and for how you said it. You had an impact. But we're trying to score political points. We're trying to own our opponents. And we get righteously indignant to where we yell at each other. I've seen it here. Gentleman who was sitting over here walked off, was yelling. I see the board up there. I know some of those people because they participate in my focus groups. I want someone to say that America is more important than the next election. I want someone to say that we have more that unites us than divides us. I'm not this, and I don't need the applause. I'm not the same man that I was 5 years ago.
Thank God.
And I care about getting it right.
I got a question for you. So I'm analyzing. I'm going to make my prediction tomorrow on the No Spin News. You go to my website, BillO'Reilly.com. That's where we live. On the election. And I'm basing my prediction on voter registrations, which are surging for Republicans in certain swing states, as you know, right?
Yes.
Pennsylvania, Nevada. How important is the shift into Republican registration this year going to be?
I think it's going to be significant. And there was a time, so let me tell you why I got it wrong. I thought the debate performance, Trump's debate performance, was so bad that he was done and that Harris was the next president. I got it wrong because Trump absolutely has a 50-50 shot of winning. But what does that mean when you can argue over eating dogs and cats and it doesn't affect your vote? What does it mean when you can say things that are really rough?
Okay, can I just say one thing, though? How do you know that Donald Trump, were he to lose again, would honor the results of the election? Isn't that the real peril, Frank? You worry about the division in the country. I worry about President Donald Trump. Will the former president heed the word of the American people, and if he loses? That's what I want to know.
And I can tell you from the polling that Republicans do not believe he will. And Republicans, some of them want him to continue to fight. And that's not what should be happening. Again, I'm not trying to own. I'm not trying to make this case for Trump or for Harris. I want us to take a look at who we are, how we behave, how we talk to each other, and chill out just a little bit.
Let me interject.
Yes.
Before progress is made, you got to be real. Is Donald Trump going to accept the results of the election if he loses? Of course he's not. We all know this. But when you look at America, understand why he has the support that he had. I've often said 81+ million people did not all of a sudden decide to vote for Joe Biden in the year 2020. They were voting against Donald Trump. 4 years later, that's where we are as a nation. You're either going to vote against him or you're going to vote against the cesspool that has been Washington, that has American citizens so disgusted that they're willing to put him in the office. Understand what Donald Trump represents. The manner in which he speaks with a level of disgust, of annoyance, of fatigue over what Washington had become long before he arrived. You can have Nikki Haley, I looked this up, you'd appreciate this, whether it was Ted Cruz, whether it was Liz Cheney, whether it was Marco Rubio, whether it was anybody. You saw results that said, had any of them been in the position that Donald Trump was in, they would have governed pretty much similar, 92, 93%, they would have endorsed the same things he endorsed, which means you could have gone in a different direction and selected somebody else. Well, why didn't they? Why has he been a Republican nominee since 2016? Because he says to Washington what folks out there want to say to Washington in the manner that they want it said. They don't want you looking at, they don't want to look at Washington and say, we're really displeased
with how you're acting, and we wish you would get better. They want Washington. They want somebody to tell Washington, y'all are full of it. We can't stand you. We don't trust you. We don't like you.
Even to the extent that you ignored the results of the election.
Listen, I'm not voting for the man, but I'm telling you what they're saying. And in the end, because that's how they feel, we have to pay attention to that.
I want to get two questions from the audience right now. And I will say this, although I'm kind of surprised that I am. We do have to add into the analysis. He did leave. January 6th was terrible. I covered it in real time. We all saw it. I couldn't believe he didn't step up sooner than he did, and I couldn't believe when he did that he didn't do more than he did. But he did leave. He did. Right? By January 20th, we were transitioning to another government. It was ugly. It shouldn't have been that way. But, you know, he left.
Chris, can I just, the one thing I think is important, and you know that I'm struggling with this in every possible way. Harris, the vice president, has not told the people, and she could have done this on CNN. She could have done this on this show. She could have done this in the debates. This is what I'm going to do in the first hour. This is what I'm going to do in the first day. This is what I'm going to do in the first week, first month, first year, and particularly with the Speaker of the House, maybe a Democrat, they need to have support in Congress. That's all the public is asking from her. Tell us exactly what you're going to do this way, and we will seriously consider you.
And look,
she hasn't done it.
It's one of the mysteries of why she hasn't. And that's something that we're going to have to digest in these next 6 days. We'll see what the turnout is. We'll see what the result is. Hopefully, you haven't mentioned what I hope happens, which is a huge win. I hope that if it's Trump or if it's Harris, I hope it's a blowout and that people can move on from that. Where's Sophia? Oh, you have a microphone, which is good because I'm holding one, talking into it, but it's not working. Isn't that funny? Go ahead. What's your question? And
Hi. First, I want to thank everyone for being here. This evening has been insightful. But yes, my question is for Sarah Palin.
Sure.
You are the only one here who has run for president, and you are a woman, and you are voting for Trump. If Kamala does win, would you celebrate that as a win for women as a whole?
Again, gender is, I'm lucky that I was raised in a family and in a state where there truly is so much equality that gender has not been a part of my psyche in deciding who I'm going to vote for or who I'll celebrate. I'm going to celebrate America regardless. I don't want Americans to be frightened. I don't want you to be discouraged or frightened. Especially in this election season, we need to remember we cannot put our faith and our hope in a politician, in any man or any woman. We're fallible. There's so much fallibility. We all have to have, and collectively, America has to have a reservoir of inner strength from within. And I ask God to fill up that reservoir within me so that I am fearless. I know that there's something much greater than what's going on in our political season today. I'll celebrate America, no matter who wins. And you rightfully know who I want to win, but I will. And as you although have been suggesting also, we do need to talk more about that unity that has to happen. And when we individually and then, yes, collectively can dig into something that's greater than the man and the woman who are running today, then we're going to avoid the civil war that too many people are talking about and quasi-threatening even, because we don't want to go there. We don't have to go there. How absolutely unnecessary. What's necessary is to talk about how we're going to start bridging that gap, though, between those who supported Trump, those who supported Kamala. We got to get it together.
I want to bring in Professor Alan Lichtman. And Alan, I want you to the professor is the developer of the 13 keys. Okay, he's 10 for 10 in presidential elections. And he also keeps telling me that I'm wrong about how I see it, which is that it seems like it's a grievance election and therefore it would be Trump's to lose. He says no, he's going to explain why to you. But I want you to understand it in context. Eddie Bright is a CEO of a company that works all across the country, putting people in jobs, and he understands the economics at play, especially from the perspective of race and where it is. And you have a specific question. What is it?
Yeah, first of all, my question is for Bill, and I just want to make a quick statement. The only thing we should separate by color is laundry. So.
I like that.
Bill, I'm the CEO of the largest black-owned staffing executive search firm in the world. Mm-hmm. We have placed minorities in C-suite positions, board positions, leadership positions in technology, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, commercial. So what I need to know is, knowing this, who are the black jobs that Donald Trump is talking are being taken away by illegal immigrants?
Thank you, Eddie.
On that, number one, I'm not a spokesperson for the Trump campaign. In fact, he's mad at me now because I said that it was an idiot move to put that jerk comedian on your undercard. He didn't know that happened, but it's his event. It's like your company. If you got somebody running around the hallway of your company saying that people are garbage, how long is that going to last?
I would take the weight for it.
Okay. There you go. So your question is, what is he referring to when he mentioned that?
Yes.
He's referring to service jobs. And he's referring to jobs like landscaping, painting, things like that. And how it goes, and you must know this, I'm sure you do, is that there are a lot of unscrupulous employers who pay off the
All right,
book
let's hurry. I'm
wages
tired of this.
that are lower by a lot than union jobs and legitimate jobs. They get undocumented people in, they pay them cash, much lower, and then the people who would ordinarily do those jobs are shut out. That's what Trump is talking about.
Is that predominantly black jobs? Are those?
It's primarily minority jobs.
Not black jobs. Professor Alan Lichtman, I heard you say, let's go. I'm tired of this. And the reason that you are is that while you are interested in political dialogue, in developing the 13 keys, you say we fundamentally misunderstand what plays out in elections versus what is talked about in elections. What does that mean for 6 days from now, and why?
It means everything. The keys to the White House have been right since I predicted Ronald Reagan's reelection in April 1982, nearly 3 years ahead of time, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again. Against all odds, all the conventional wisdom, I predicted Trump to win in 2016. Neither of these predictions made me very popular in 90% Democratic Washington, D.C., where I teach at American University. But that's the secret of the keys. They're totally nonpartisan. And unlike any other system, they're based on how American presidential elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party, not on all the talking points on both sides of the campaign. And the keys gauge that. And the way it works, if 6 or more of the keys go against the White House party, they're predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they're predicted winners. And this has worked for over 40 years. Maybe I've just outlived every other forecaster.
So, and you are sticking right now that the keys predict that Vice President Harris wins the election in 6 days?
That's right. I only have 4 keys down, 2 keys short of predicting a defeat. And I very deliberately issued my prediction with the New York Times on September 5th before the so-called pivotal debate that all the pundits were talking about between Harris and Trump, because I wanted to make the point, it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And by the way, Hillary Clinton won all the debates in 2016 and still lost. John Kerry won the debates in 2004 and still lost.
Understood. I was very upset about that because I want you to do it on my show. Professor Alan Lichtman, thank you very much. I'll see you in 6 days. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with a couple of more audiences, questions, some closing thoughts. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to News Nation's Town Hall /telethon/ a little bit for everybody. Got Stephen A. Smith, you got Frank Luntz, you got Bill O'Reilly, Geraldo Rivera, Governor Sarah Palin, and we've had a cast of characters all night long giving different takes on what should be mattering to all of us right now. I want to go to an audience question here. Vanessa has a question, and it is for Congressman Moskowitz, yes?
Yes, it is.
So, Congressman, come up here so you're looking at her while she asks. And just, you look so good in that suit. Really stepped
Stephen
it
A.
up.
was here. So.
Really stepped it up. Vanessa,
Hi,
what's your question for the Congressman?
Yeah, so I'm a Democrat. I'm voting for Kamala. I have a lot of Jewish friends that did not like Trump, but are going to vote for him anyway on one issue, Israel. They feel that Trump is going to be a bigger supporter of Israel than Kamala Harris is. They feel that the current administration has not been strong enough on fighting anti-Semitism, that they could have been a lot stronger on the anti-protests and taking a stronger stance against the college campus encampments. They just basically think that the world would be afraid of Trump and that, he would be tougher on the Middle East issues. And I don't know what to say to them. I don't agree. And I just wonder what you would say to that.
Vanessa, thank you. What do you got?
It's a really good question to show Bill O'Reilly that I am fair. Trump did a lot of good stuff for Israel in his administration. He did the Abraham Accords. He should get credit for that. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He should get credit for that. The Biden administration has continued those policies because they were the right policies for Israel. But you don't have to, we can clap for that. But you don't have to listen to my opinion on whether the Biden-Harris administration has been good for Israel. Go listen to the folks in Dearborn, Michigan, who hate the policies of the Biden-Harris administration because they have been pro-Israel. She gets protested everywhere she goes by progressives that I have to deal with in my party and by socialists that don't belong in my party because of the Biden-Harris position on Israel. Trump has something going on in his party called isolationism. That's a big problem for Israel. You should talk to your Republican friends about how J.D. Vance and that whole wing of the Republican Party are isolationists. Israel is not an exempt from that. And so, look, I actually think both candidates will be good for Israel. I think there's a lot of evidence for that. I think Joe Biden has been tremendous for Israel. Okay, this idea that he's not been good for Israel is just not true. Now, I think the administration was slow to respond to the campus protests. I've said that before. They were slow. There is no doubt. I think everybody knows if that wasn't Jewish students, if those were minority students, if those were LGBTQ students blocked from going to their class, that wouldn't have gotten past lunchtime on the first day. But because it was Jews, and we don't fit into this box of protected classes, right? All of a sudden, people on the left were silent, and they failed.
Can I jump in? He's my favorite guy now. The congressman's my favorite guy.
Bill, I love this. Right? I love this.
Why, because you have matching suits?
I'm not wearing a suit, but
okay.
My favorite guy. If Biden and Harris have been so good for Israel, why does Netanyahu despise Joe Biden?
Well, look, I'm not getting into
Whoa!
Hold on.
He's the president. Come on.
Oh, let's go backwards. Remember, Trump was very mad at Netanyahu when Netanyahu
That's
said Biden.
True, but
when Netanyahu said Biden won.
That's whataboutism.
Okay. Well,
why
they're both true,
Netanyahu...
Bill. They're both true. It's not whataboutism.
So take the spies out of it.
Listen,
what does it mean that Netanyahu seems to think Biden is not as good a proposition?
That's right.
Okay. Listen, we're all pontificating whether Netanyahu likes Biden or like Biden.
Jerusalem Post will tell you that he despises him.
Assume it. Why would that be?
Well, first of all, this is larger than one leader of the country. And I say this all the time. Hold on. I say this all the time to my Democratic colleagues that like to demonize Netanyahu. Netanyahu is not Israel. Israel is a country. Israel has a leader. I didn't hate America. Wait, time out. I didn't hate America when Donald Trump was president. I didn't like Donald Trump. I disagree, but I didn't hate my country.
There's got to be a reason.
Okay, but so now we're going to decide on whether Biden has been good for Israel, on whether Netanyahu has a better relationship. By the way, Putin has a better relationship with Donald Trump. Is that how we should decide? Let's not get into that.
Congressman, can I ask you one question? You and I have talked about this. Why is it acceptable to attack the Jewish community? Why has it become acceptable on college campuses, not just for the protests, but physical intimidation? Why have we come to this point? And this is an example where we have to work together, where it cannot be a Republican or Democratic issue. What are we going to do to say we don't tolerate with the black community, we don't tolerate with the Asian community, the Latino community, the transgender community. We don't tolerate with anyone, but we tolerate anti-Semitism. What are we going to do, Republicans and Democrats, to say never again?
Yeah, look, you're talking to someone whose grandmother and sister were put into a train, part of the kinder transport, and shipped out of Germany, right? So this is not new for the Jewish community, and it existed way before that as well. Both parties are failing in this, and I'll tell you what I mean. When Tucker Carlson has a Holocaust denier on his show, Republicans have a hard time calling them out. And Democrats have a hard time calling out stuff that comes from Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. Easy to call out the other side, harder to deal with it in your tent. So all of a sudden, anti-Semitism is a team sport.
So how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we get it done?
We got to have conversations. Democrats and Republicans work on bills together. I worked with Elise Stefanik on the campus anti-Semitism bill together to call for the resignations of those presidents. We got to figure out how to bridge the divide. Because you're right, if the Jewish community becomes a partisan issue, right, it's going to be terrible, disastrous for the Jewish community.
Congressman,
Thanks, Chris.
appreciate you. You know, we covered that very robustly here at NewsNation. Two more quick beats before we end the show. One, Dusty's in the control room. By the way, this was Dusty's idea, to do this tonight. And she and the team populated the whole thing. NewsNation, our bosses went with it, and that's why we're here. So, Dusty, thank you to you and the team. What are you monitoring on X that should be interesting to us?
I'm monitoring on X that we're absolutely flooded. I wish we had more time. We don't. I'll say what Chris won't, which is you each have about 10 seconds to answer this. And it says, is there anything that all your guests could agree on? And you each have 5 seconds now to answer.
That Cuomo did a good job moderating.
Oh,
What that matters, do people agree on?
Despite its flaws, this is the greatest country in the world.
Amen. That's
Decorum and decency towards our fellow men and women is an absolute must if we are going to prosper as a nation.
that too.
Amen, amen. Bill, you wasted yours on me, but I'll give you a second bite at the apple.
I don't want a second one. That's what I agree on. I don't agree on anything else with Cuomo. He did a decent job, right?
Get off my lawn.
Believe me, I've heard a lot worse. I just want to bring something in for perspective, just to give you a little bit here at the end. Andrew Grayson is a friend of mine, and he's been helping us here at NewsNation. He's with Six Pack Coverage. Now, you look at his site online. He has a syndicate of contacts on college campuses all over this country. Andrew, tell us what you're hearing tonight. How well does it square or not square with the conversations on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So my name is Andrew Grayson. I'm the founder and CEO of Six Pack Coverage. We're a sports media and entertainment company. So we reach about 15 million people a month. And I'd say 88% of that is between the 18 and 30-year-old demographics. We have a great say on what's actually happening across all these college campuses. The biggest thing that we've seen on a survey we did the last 2 weeks, about 16,000 responses, was student debt, immigration, and Kamala's leadership experience. Those are the three biggest issues the 18 to 30-year-olds that we've gathered are worried about for this upcoming election. Who can handle those? Who can fix those? So I guess that up to discussion kind of along par of what we've talked about here tonight.
Regional, north, south, all across the country, that was the three.
Yes, that's across red and blue states from Eugene, Oregon, Syracuse to Tallahassee at Florida State. Those were the three most common voted in the survey that we conducted.
Not reproductive rights, even though that group in 2020 exploded. They voted at 65, 70% all across the country. Be interesting to see how they weigh in.
You know what? Let me say real quickly, though, my daughter, Bristol, she had texted me during the break, and she said, Mom, my peers, my friends in her profession in real estate and all that, she goes, we're not talking about reproductive, we're talking about the price of eggs, we're talking about the price of groceries and how we're going to pay for our children.
We will see how it plays out. Yeah. Governor, thank you for taking the opportunity. Geraldo, Bill, Stephen, Frank, all of you. This wouldn't have happened if you guys didn't want it to. So thank you so much for being with us on NewsNation. Conversation is the cure. Good luck with your vote. And thank you to Sling TV. Good night. Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.